Hi there, and thank you for taking your time to watch this video. This is a story based on true events, and thus I wish to send my respects to these unfortunate souls, even if it was some time ago. It truly is still a tragedy. And also, I'm not a first class theorist, so all claims presented here were made by other people. I truly have no input of my own to give. With all that being said, I hope that you continue to watch and gain something from this video. Let's begin. Imagine yourself taking a bit of an outdoor adventure in the mountain ranges of the Ural Mountains, the Kholat Syakhl region. You're taking a serious hike up the mountain, but then it starts snowing heavily. Presumably, since I've never gone hiking, so I'm not completely sure how extreme the conditions should be for it to be considered bad weather when you're already hiking up a snowy mountain in winter, but alas, it starts snowing more. You can't continue on, right? So you look for a place where you can find shelter and find an inviting cave that looks safe enough. It's dry and there's ample space to create a small fire and a place to rest. There's not much wildlife nearby, so you have no need to worry about natural predators. You take refuge here. But as you prepare to set up your station, you notice a faint light deep in the cave. So you panic a little. Then you take whatever weapon you have and approach cautiously towards the lights. You slowly lean forward, preparing for any alarming occurrences, and to your surprise, you find a sort of campsite where an old man sitting near a fire, grilling his meat. You debate to yourself whether to make yourself known or get out of there. You also think of attacking him, but there's no way you would attack a lone elderly man in the middle of nowhere since you're a decent person. You decide on the former option, and as you move out of hiding to make yourself known,
It's pretty nice in here, isn't it?
but in Russian, and assuming that you, viewer, don't speak Russian, you don't understand what he's saying. But you do understand the state of your heart after he spoke, and it's in a state of slight panic, or surprise, or a combination of both. You approach the man, introduce yourself as an adventurous adventurer, and assure him that you mean no harm while still being alert for anything. But very quickly you realize that this old man is nothing more than an old man living out his dreams and ticking off his bucket list before he, you know, passes. He's very kind and speaks decent English, so you're able to communicate quite well.
So, you do know about what has happened on these mountains, right? That's why you're here. For some real life experience of that place where the mystery took place. Pretty courageous of you.
You wonder what he's talking about, since for some reason you've never heard of this incident. Surprised, the old man begins to tell the true events of the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Well, on these mountains in 1959.
February 12th, 1959, a group of experienced hikers were expected to return to Vizhay where Igor Dyatlov was expected to send a telegram to their sports club. When no telegram arrived by the 20th, the families of these hikers became anxious and contacted authorities to begin a search operation. Initial search parties consisted of volunteer students and teachers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, which later were joined by the military personnel. On the 20th of February, searchers located the group's abandoned tent on the slope of the Kholat Syakhl. They found it partially collapsed and covered in snow. Most strikingly, it had been cut open from the inside with knives. All the group's belongings were left inside, like food, extra clothing, etc. Nearby footprints of around 8 to 9 people were found. These footprints showed that some of the people were wearing socks, some were barefoot, and one had only one shoe, suggesting that the hikers had left in a hurry. These footprints led away from the tent towards the forest edge around 1.5 kilometers downhill. Funnily enough, though, these footprints indicated that the group had left in an orderly manner, in a single file line, and not the chaotic scattering expected in an emergency. These footprints were also relatively undisturbed, meaning that there was no signs of chasing, dragging, or combat. This contradicts theories of overwhelming panic. Following these footsteps, searchers found two bodies, Yuri Korovashenko and Yuri Doroshenko, under a large saya tree to the forest. They were found barefoot and in underwear. Doroshenko was found lying on his back, arms across his chest. Possible cause of death? Hypothermia. Kirifashenko was found with similar injuries and lying face up. Possible cause of death was also hypothermia. There was evidence of a small fire that may have been made, and they also had burns on themselves, suggesting that they may have burnt themselves against this fire, but what actually burnt them is unclear. Not far from this tree, the Pine of Death it was dubbed, they found the bodies of Igor Dyatlov. He was dressed warmly, but enough for the extreme cold. He had minor abrasions on his face and hands, clenched fists, possibly indicating that he fought until his last moments, and he was found lying on his back, arms bent as if he was shielding his face. Possible cause of death? Hypothermia. Zinaida Kolmokorova was also found in similar conditions to Dyatlov, considering that she was dressed but not warm enough for the extreme cold. She had swollen lips, minor bruising, and scratches, and was found lying down with her arms stretched forward as if she was trying to crawl back to the tent. Possible cause of death? Hypothermia. Rustem Slobodin. He was more appropriately dressed for the cold but had only one boot. He had a skull fracture, bruising on his head, and a swollen lip. The skull fracture suggests that he suffered a heavy blow. Possible cause of death was ruled as hypothermia. These three appeared to have been attempting to return to the tent when they died. The remaining four hikers were not found until May 4th, 1959. After the spring thorn, their bodies were discovered in a ravine about 75 meters from the Sayat tree, under about 4 meters of snow. Nikolai Nignial Brignalos had appropriate clothing. He had sustained a massive skull fracture, so his cause of death was ruled as blunt force trauma. Dubininia was heavily clothed but with no shoes. She sustained heavy injury and had missing body parts. Cause of death was probably due to trauma from extreme force. Alexandra Kolovatov was dressed warmly and had a broken nose and neck deformation, but he had died of hypothermia. And lastly, Semyon Zolotarov. He was found heavily clothed, but again with no shoes. He too had broken ribs and missing body parts, and the cause of death was ruled trauma by a powerful force. January 23, 1959. The group begins their trek. They were led by Igor Dyatlov, and initially they were 10. The group was made up of students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institution. They departed from Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg. January 25th, the group reaches Vizhay, the last inhabited settlement. January 27th, they begin their trek towards the Ortonton Mountain. January 28th, Yuri Yudin turns back due to health issues, who ends up being the only survivor. January 31st, the group reaches the edge of the highland and prepare for climbing. February 1st, last diary entry and final photographs taken. Established camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. January 12th, expected return date passes with no contact. And that takes us back to the incident. The tapes were found from the inside, suggesting that the hikers had left the tent by choice in the freezing nights where temperatures were an estimated negative 30 degrees Celsius. And not only that, but they had left in a sort of orderly manner. Some without proper clothing or boots, where survival would be a guaranteed impossible. What could be so threatening that leaving the tent to an almost certain death would be preferable than staying inside, huh? And if they were in some moral danger, why did they leave so calmly? Why didn't they go back when there weren't any signs of moral danger? There also seem to be contradictions with the physical evidence. Dubinia was discovered to have a missing tongue, missing eyes, missing parts of her lips, and some reports say that there was blood found in her stomach, meaning that her tongue may have been removed when she was alive. She had fractured ribs, about 10 broken ribs to be specific, and hemorrhaging in her heart area, which suggests that she could have been injured when she was still alive. Zolotarov had 5 fractured ribs and missing eyes. But get this, there were no external wounds that matched his rib fractures. Dublai Brignalos had massive, man, that is a beautiful surname by the way, had massive skull fractures requiring significant force to create. His skull was shattered, yet there was no external signs of impact. It's so strange that with these injuries, that despite the severity of them, there was minimum to no external trauma. Common sensely speaking, there usually would be outside wounds that would accompany these internal injuries. Medical experts noted that these injuries resembled those caused by high pressure applied to a large area rather than a focused impact, like a weapon or a fall. The medical reports compared the force required to cause these injuries as equivalent to being hit by a car or crushed by a heavy weight, yet there was no evidence of either scenario. The Soviet forensics experts estimated that the force required to cause such injuries would be far beyond human capacity, equivalent to an extremely high pressure of several tons applied evenly across the chest cavity. They specifically noted that it was not consistent with a person being struck with an object. In modern forensic terms, these types of pressure injuries resemble those seen in a crush scenario or blast injuries, where force is applied simultaneously across a wide area of the body. There was also some oddity with their clothing. Some victims wore clothes belonging to others, some were partially dressed, while others wore multiple layers. Some clothing showed higher than normal radiation levels, and the radiation was concentrated on specific items and not evenly distributed over all the clothing. Although the Soviet Union was known to be conducting nuclear tests and experiments in the region, no official explanation was provided for the radiation found. Strange orange-colored skin and premature gray hair may have been found on some of the victims. The orange skin being odd since it was unusual considering the time of year, it being winter. Some accounts mention that the skin had a leathery appearance. However, this had been explained as possible extreme cold exposure. Several frostbite can lead to discoloration sometimes. Other explanations include post-mortem changes which can alter the skin coloration, as well as the gray hair. Though official reports don't document this much, it does appear in witness testimonies. Gray hair on kids in their 20s. But there was a reasonable explanation to this too. Exposure to certain chemicals or radiation has been known to affect hair color, or ice crystals forming on the hair could give it a grayish appearance. Whatever it was, I guess we would not know for certain since the few photos of the bodies that have been released publicly and those that exist are in black and white, making color changes impossible to verify. Speaking of witness accounts, several indigenous Masi people reported seeing strange orange spheres or lights in the sky over the mountains on the night of February 1st and 2nd, 1959. Some accounts mention that the Soviet military observers in that region documented unusual aerial activity during this period. Also, at least 2 members of the search party later claimed to have observed strange lights or glowing orbs in the sky during their search operations. Curious. Lev Ivanov, the chief investigator of the case, made a remarkable statement decades later in 1990, where he wrote an article for a Soviet newspaper where he admitted that he and other officials had witnessed flying spheres in the area during the investigation and claimed that he was ordered to remove any mentions of these observations from the official case files. He suggested that the authorities believed these phenomena might have been connected to the hiker's death. Personnel from weather stations in the region reported logging unusual atmospheric phenomena during that period. Some accounts mentioned that the railway workers, approximately 50 kilometers from the incident site, observed unusual lights in the sky. The witness accounts are complicated by the fact that the Soviet military's presence in the area was itself largely classified, making confirmation of their observations difficult, and many witness statements were either not documented in the publicly released files or reportedly removed. Some witnesses came forward only years or decades later, which does raise questions about their memory reliability. And notably, the late 1915's Soviet Union was a time of significant UFO interest and Cold War paranoia, potentially coloring interpretations. Many witnesses have long since been deceased, so it's pretty impossible to validate at this point of time if you're alive in this day and age. So, what actually happened to these hikers? Well, plenty of theories have been presented. A rare and powerful katabatic wind could have created conditions so extreme that the hikers had to flee in urgency. Hypothermia set in, leading to confusion and irrational behavior. However, the injuries suffered by these victims were too severe to be attributed to the wind and cold alone. Infrasound induced panic for these hikers, strong winds passing through the mountains, creating infrasound, low frequency vibrations that could cause panic, nausea, or hallucinations. This could have caused the hikers to become disoriented and flee their tent in fear. But once again, it doesn't explain why the injuries were so severe. Entering a secret military weapons testing site, which could lead them to be exposed to any military weapons or experiments, authorities may have covered up the real cause of death to protect classified information. However, no military presence was confirmed in the area. Criminal involvement by escaped prisoners, etc., etc. However, none of these theories were enough to satisfactorily explain all the evidence. An avalanche was ruled as the official cause of this incident, or the most likely case. A small slab avalanche may have struck the tent, forcing the hikers to flee in panic. The injuries on some of the bodies could be explained by the heavy snow pressing on them. Recent studies suggest that a rare, delayed slab avalanche could have occurred, triggered by the group's movement or shifting snow. However, even that doesn't provide an answer for the radiation or the lack of avalanche debris. The Soviet government's handling amplified the mystery, abruptly closing the investigation with the vague conclusion of a compelling natural force, classifying the files and closing the area. This official behavior suggests something beyond a simple hiking accident. But perhaps most compelling is the human story. 9 young, vibrant individuals with promising futures ahead of them, captured in their own photographs looking happy and normal just hours before something caused them to make a fatal decision. The contrast between their documented normalcy and their inexplicable actions creates a psychological mystery as much as a physical one. Despite modern investigations, including Russia's 2019 official conclusion of an avalanche, the case remains open in the minds of many because no explanation has managed to tie together all these disparate elements into a coherent narrative that doesn't itself strain credibility.
So conclusively, I guess we'll never truly know what exactly happened here on these mountains.
The elderly man concluded with a sigh. You look at him, a little bewildered by everything just revealed. This story brings a slight chill down your spine, not because of the graphic nature of the story, but the realization of how close your proximity to this incident is.
I wonder if their ghosts still lurk in these mountain ranges.
The old man wonders aloud. If so, you reply as you get ready to sleep, a little startled by the idea, but you quickly dismiss it. They'll tell us what happened. Thank you for watching, and make sure to do further research on this incident if you want more information. Unfortunately, this video is not a documentary or a detailed information piece. I'm really just creating a general story of this incident. It's a shallow case file, and it's more for the mystery aspect and remembering the incident than anything else. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and please have a good day.